Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Berlin-based Jazz Multi-Instrumentalist, composer, arranger, and conductor, the great Ed Partyka, on the 2023 album Hold Your Fire. During our interview, we get into depth about this elegant new album, modern living in this post-COVID world, live shows, students in jazz these days, and so much more. Enjoy this interview. Thank you again for reaching out, sending over the wonderful vinyl. I really appreciate it. And I think before we get into this album, I think the thing that's so fun about, there's multiple levels of this getting vinyl in the mail. Not only is it vinyl, which is so wonderful that we're getting back to it, but you musicians are out here releasing music now. It's happening again. So I guess my whole question to you right now is now that we're in 2023, we're getting into a post-pandemic period of our existence. How does it feel to be able to have brand new material to put out with the possibilities of us getting back to things the way that we were used to?
It feels very good. Of course, those of us who work with larger ensembles, big bands, the pandemic was just terrible for us. Because, of course, playing in a jazz club with 20 musicians sitting shoulder to shoulder, that was one of the first things that was cut out. It was the last things that came back. So it's really great to be back doing what we're doing. And I do feel that the break that we had has sort of energized everybody, the performers, the artists, as well as the audience. What we're noticing is, like, when we perform live now, the audience is also just seems to be really much more into it. And, it was something that a lot of people missed during that time sitting at home. As good as a live stream might be, there is nothing like experiencing music live at an intimate venue with a great band. So it's something that we really noticed. It just seems like everybody's energized in a really positive way now.
And it doesn't seem like it's fleeting at all. I know after 9/11, the world responded and things kind of fell back into order. But it really feels like this absence and this appreciation for not only art, but music and specifically jazz is really deep, bone deep, to a way where I think this is going to stay around for a long, long time.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that. It really, because the thing is another thing that I've noticed that I've been seeing. I teach at two different universities, at the University of Music and Performing Arts in Graz, Austria, and at the Music University in Lucerne, Switzerland. And during the pandemic, one of the fears that I had, I thought, oh my gosh, our application numbers, the numbers of people who are going to want to study jazz, I'm sure they're going to go down. Because, after seeing how fragile the career path is, and especially during the pandemic, I thought, okay, what young person would want to start a career in jazz music now? But what we've seen is young people are totally enthusiastic about getting into the music and, making this a career. So I think that that's also a really positive sign for the future.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've noticed that so much. There was a lot of musicians that I would talk to over the pandemic, that new friends that were musicians that would move out of big cities like New York and Chicago and go back home and go back to school or get another job or become an over-the-road trucker, something to pay the bills, and there was a fear that no one would come back. So if you're a younger player and you're looking at this exodus from an art form that you want to enter a life of employment into, you're thinking, well, naturally it's going to happen. But I think the opposite has actually happened. There's been a much bigger influx and a better appreciation. I'm certain that the jazz elders are ecstatic that this torch is burning brighter than it ever has.
Exactly. And, of course, there were some musicians who did leave the workforce in the pandemic and who have not come back. But I think that was just inevitable. And maybe it actually sped up some things that were going to happen, maybe over a period of 10 years otherwise, but it just sort of accelerated that, So, and I think the thing is maybe it's also, it's thinned out the herd a little bit, if we'd like to say it like that. But, but some of the musicians that I know who have now changed careers, Well, they were having a rough time before the pandemic as well, so it did sort of concentrate things a little bit. Of course, we did lose some musicians, to other careers, but I think the enthusiasm is there, and hopefully, the venues and the record labels will continue to thrive. I mean, that's going to be something that we're looking at over here to see, if all the venues are going to be healthy and make it. But everything is looking very good right now.
Let's get into Hold Your Fire, and I think sometimes from my end of things, I may look into it a little more. I love metaphor and meaning. And Hold Your Fire, it seems as though that's what we did for 3 years, all of us collectively. We held on to this fire, hoping that it wasn't going to go out. Now that we're back, it's like, we're ready. We're ready for the heat to come in. I love the painting, the tapestry of abstract art on the front of the album cover. Talk to me a little bit about the aesthetics and the meaning behind the title.
Yeah, well, actually, the thing about Hold Your Fire, if you listen to the lyrics, and Yulia Olszewski, our vocalist, who it's her composition, and I did all the arranging on the album. When she gave me the song a couple of years ago, if you listen to the lyrics, it's talking about calling your allies and holding your fire, and it's basically, I thought it was a song about war. And during this, while I was writing the arrangement, the first time we rehearsed it, she actually told me, she said, listen, it's not about war, it's about relationships. And of course, for those of us who have been in a bad relationship, a bad relationship is very, very close to war, So, but once again, the metaphors and the stories are the same. Whether we're talking about a conflict between nations or a conflict between people, it's still about conflict and about the resolution of conflict. A very interesting thing is the album officially came out on February 24th, which is the anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we were in Berlin for the album release, and actually some people went to sort of a support of Ukraine rally, and they took the album with and used it as sort of a poster, because the colors of the album, and this was also something we weren't really aiming for, but it is also the color scheme used on the album that is the colors of the German national flag. So, so actually it became sort of a political statement, even though it wasn't really intended.
That's interesting. It's kind of turned into its own kind of anthem. The mood and mode on this album is very reflective. There's a lot of this that's very introspective, and I'm curious how much of this, listening to this album, there's a level of introspection. There's a level of really kind of honing in on, I think to a certain degree, what we lived through the last 3 years. How much of this artistic vision that you had played to the time we lived through, and really what were you kind of going for overall?
The music was, a lot of it was written during lockdowns when we were forced to be at home. So of course it was, that the whole mood of the time is what sort of, it seeped into the music, and this is something whether or not that was, I wasn't thinking about it at the time when I was writing the music, but it did seep into it. And, what happened was sort of when we, if you look at the three compositions of Yulia, they are connected somehow, and also, the way she writes and the way I decided to orchestrate and arrange them. And then, when we had these three sort of cornerstones of the album to put it together, then looking for some other material to offset it, to give it some balance. And that's where we ended up with this Feist cover, which we just thought was just really nice, just a really nice moment, but also, if you think about it in the context of, this whole situation, all those things we've been going through, I'm not running away. There's also some poignant statements in there about leaving, about the ending of relationships. If that can easily be connected to Yulia's composition, Dead Man, then back to Hold Your Fire. So there is a sort of a connectedness between the themes. And then the sort of extra piece that just felt like we needed it for a change of mood is the gospel piece, I Told Jesus. And this was also just something to give the album just a little bit different timbre. And one of the things I always like to do is also to be stylistically diverse. And of course, Julia's music is very, very modern, even eighth singer-songwriter. And I just felt that we needed something a little bit more traditional. And I told Jesus, influenced by Stanley Turrentine and Roberta Flack versions, the arrangement that sort of I came up with, it just felt like just a nice thing to put in the middle and connect everything else, and then also just sort of give us a little bit more of jazz tradition, a little bit more of history to settle things down. So that was sort of the overriding concept, putting the album together, and of course trying to tie it all together with the orchestrations and instrumentation. That was one of the big things on this album, with the low brass tuba bass trombone, the low woodwinds, contrabass clarinet with bass saxophone and things like that, to sort of give us this big, warm, round sort of bottom end of the orchestra. And then, of course, contrast that with sort of silver and gold colors, a lot of flutes and soprano saxophones and harmon trumpets and things. So it was also, I think, this album, I think it was one of the goals was also just to sort of really get creative with the orchestration.
This obviously is a journey that needs to be digested whole. The modern mentality is people cherry pick songs, but this really needs to be taken in its entirety. And I'm curious, what are you ultimately hoping the listener gets from this project?
I hope that when people listen to this, they will hear these wonderful stories that Julia's lyrics tell. I hope that they enjoy the wonderful improvised jazz solos that the members of the orchestra played. But also, I hope they'll get up and dance a little bit, because also a couple of these tunes, in my opinion, or at least in my world, it's pop dance music. And it's a modern big band take on that, so turn it up loud and dance. So those are a couple of things that I think that people can get from it. And also for maybe listeners who are accustomed to big band music with vocals, still being in the Nelson Riddle, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra world, to see that, hey, we're in the 21st century, and this is hopefully going to maybe be showing people that there is a very fresh way to present vocal music with big band that is looking forward and maybe not always looking backward to the 1950s.
And I think that's the thing that's refreshing. I love that, the way that you said that. That's always been a goal of my show, is that sometimes jazz gets pigeonholed into the older days, but really there's so much evolution that's going on right now, and fusing those worlds together is very important to see the timeline of jazz and how wonderful all of it is, both modern and old school. A lot of the times when I do these interviews with musicians, everybody's moving on to the next thing. But I would think with this project, with as big as it is, and always you dealing with the bigger outfit, have you moved on to the next thought of the next project, or are you really still locked in to this project and presenting it live? And where's your mentality at right now?
Well, my orchestra, the Ed Partyka Jazz Orchestra, which Julia has been a member of since 2012, it's basically our repertoire remains constant, and but constant but slowly evolving. So what will happen is we just had our record release concerts in February. The next time we're going to be playing concerts will be in June. And what will happen to the repertoire, and this is sort of what's always happens, is the core repertoire will perform that, but one or two new pieces will come in. So so if we play a concert with 10 pieces or 12 pieces, because of course most of the songs are quite long, usually one or two new things come in, and a couple of the older numbers sort of leave. So if you look back to the work that we've done over the past 10 years, there are a couple of albums where I have arranged some of Julia's compositions in the past. There's an album we released in 2014 called Hits, and an album we released in 2018 called Kopfkino. And on both of those albums, there's one or two of Julia's compositions that I arranged. So once again, the next thing will be, probably for our June concerts, I'll get one of Julia's brand new compositions, do an arrangement, sort of bring that in, and one of the older ones will come out. And so, so that's just how the program develops. And then when we have enough new material, which will probably, be in maybe 2 years, then that's the next time we'll go into the studio and record the next album. So it's like I said, it's like a slowly evolving picture.
So, Ed, anyone out there that wants to pick up a copy of Hold Your Fire, whether it's digital, CD, vinyl, where is the best place to go? And for anything pertaining to any live shows or anything about you and the band?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the album "Hold Your Fire" is on all streaming platforms, so Spotify, Apple Music, and so forth. Of course, it can be ordered online from any reputable music merchant. Of course, Amazon and everything. If you would like the vinyl, and as you mentioned before, I mean, it's just very nice cover artwork. And that's another one of the great things about vinyl. Nice place for the liner notes and photos of the band and cover artwork. And then we'll be playing live, like I said, in Berlin, Germany. The next time is in June. And basically, the best way to stay informed is through our Facebook page. We have an Ed Partyka Jazz Orchestra Facebook page with all of the information and links that everyone needs. So just stop by there. And check out what we're up to, and it's always nice to have new followers and new viewers.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to profiling this on Neon Jazz. Ed, again, thank you for reaching out. Thanks for sending this over, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Don, and hope to see you, talk to you soon the next time.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Berlin, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Ed for his time, energy, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, you can find Neon Jazz interviews on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.